Welcome back, everybody, and allow me to present our next speaker presentation from Fortescue Future Industries Global Green Energy Manufacturing Centre. Please welcome Cameron Smith. He's Fortescue Future Industries Head of Manufacturing for the Global Green Energy Manufacturing Centre in Gladstone. A former military officer who holds a Bachelor of Civil Engineering, Cameron has over 20 years' experience working in senior leadership roles in both government and private organisations, predominantly in the military, security, construction and mining sectors. Cameron's been with Fortescue Future Industries since its inception. More recently, he was given the manufacturing portfolio, which he is responsible to ensure all major input systems and components for the Fortescue Future Industries projects are available at viable cost, quality and quantum, with a broad focus across the value chain, and is currently involved in projects in wind and solar generation. Please welcome Cameron Smith and a special guest.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Good morning or good afternoon to all of those listening. It's never great before you even get started when you're completely upstaged by somebody far more important to this process than I. You can probably imagine, our chairman has literally got off a plane just a couple of hours ago after spending time quite literally all around the world. And he, as soon as I mentioned I was presenting this morning, he indicated that it'd be great if he could say good morning. So thank you very much, Chairman. Did not expect this at all, but we'd love you to say a couple of words.
Yeah, look, thank you very much for allowing me to gate crash. I apologise about the impromptu nature of this, but because of what Cameron briefed all of you are doing, I just wanted to just give you a very brief perspective. I have just come back from, as Cameron mentioned, North and South America, Middle East, North Africa, and of course Europe. I can tell you that the world is changing rapidly, and nowhere in history have we seen an energy change as quickly as happened when the tanks were Ukrainian border. There was just a set definitive purpose which just filled every room you ever spoke in, that country after country after country wanted to wean themselves quickly away from fossil fuel, and certainly away from anything which is being produced by Russia. The abhorrence of what people were seeing in the Ukraine and the necessity for the world to go green in any event just led to action becoming short to medium term to absolutely must happen now. And you may have heard that we engaged with a number of governments across Europe, like I did with North America, at the President and Chief of Staff level. And we came away with a very resolute impression I want to give to you. North America and Europe are of a mind to go green. Now, if they can do that without losing jobs, if we take North America in particular, if they can repurpose power stations to use all those fabulous linkages, pipes, wires, inland seaways to make green hydrogen instead of making power from coal, they're going to do that, and they will do that quickly. Their allegiance isn't to coal, oil, or gas. Their allegiance is to people. Their allegiance is to keeping families and people employed. So that's North America in particular. Europe is slightly different. Europe is committed to people as well, but it's committed to getting out of anything which Russia sells as soon as possible. And Germany in particular knows that if it just pulls the equivalent of, say, 54 billion cubic meters of gas, which is what they import from Russia every year, away as orders to Qatar or Saudi Arabia, they're just going to create havoc in the marketplace. They're going to push the gas price up, as we've seen. And the inadvertent beneficiary of that is Vladimir Putin. What they want to do and what they've instructed us, and you always trust, I think, a lot what a person says, but you can really trust what they do. And what Germany has done is said, like, let's make step one. Let's replace 1/3 of everything we import from Russia in terms of natural gas, calorific energy, with green hydrogen. That 1/3 is a hard order we now have for 5 million tonnes. They've asked us to give them a minimum of 4. We've asked for a maximum of 5, just so we can get our production systems up and away quickly. But this 5 million tonnes needs to be produced here in Australia, and this is a production scale we haven't seen yet in Australia, because it can't happen over 2 or 3 decades. It has to come into place quickly, between 1, 2, maximum 3 years. And 5 million tonnes in terms of energy from one single country would probably be a record in terms of energy exports from Australia in one single agreement. So you can tell by the magnitude, this is a very important order which Australia has, which FFI has the responsibility to execute on and wants to work with all of you. Now, Cameron in particular has been tasked with getting into place the world's largest electrolyser system, the very simple facility which splits that into renewable energy, which, of course, when you burn the product of water, hydrogen, it emits a huge amount of energy. That's the point. But then after that, it goes back to water, which is why it's pollution-free, which is why the world wants it and why Germany's given us an order for 5 million tonnes of it. Specifically, Australia now has to deliver. So I've asked my dear friend Cameron to now make not 2 million tonnes, 2,000 megawatts rather, just got to get my numbers right, 2,000 megawatts of electrolysers in Gladstone, but to ramp that quickly to 5,000 megawatts per year, and then from 5,000 to 15,000 minimum megawatts per year, i.e. that has to be a 15 gigawatt per annum electrolyser facility, and that will only be just enough to start turning the world green and to meet that one order of 5 million tonnes of green hydrogen from Australia to Germany. As you see, we will be announcing other orders in the coming months and years, which will take that up. And it just means that Australia and all of you must industrialise so that we can become the green superpower of the world. We cannot do that without the facilities you'll bring to the table. Yes, I'd like it to be local content, but remember, we'll be competing against China, we'll be competing against North America, we'll be competing against all these other nations. So let's make sure our local content is hyper competitive. It's made in Australia, and it can compete in price and certainly quality with everyone else in the world. Thank you for listening to me. Be assured, our green hydrogen future is now our green hydrogen present. It is upon us right now. Thank you, and over to Cameron.
Thanks for your time, Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cameron.
Very, very hard to follow the Chairman, particularly when he comes with such a depth of not only experience and understanding of the broader system, but quite literally, while he has just spent some time speaking with us, he's actually just arrived back and was meeting with the President of the United States as early as a week ago. What I'd like to do this morning is really just spend a little bit of time to give you an understanding of FFI manufacturing. I'm sure many of you are well aware of Fortescue Metals Group and the work they've done. I'll talk a little bit about the Green Energy Manufacturing Centre. The first phase is the electrolyser facility, which is under construction right now. But I think it's important to note that notwithstanding the increase that we need in electrolyser capacity, but there is a huge number of systems that will underpin Australia's ability to very quickly establish and develop a renewable energy capacity that supports power to X going directly into electrolysis and into green hydrogen. Then what really, I guess, matters to a group like this is what are we looking for? I think it's really important to understand that, and you got the message clearly from the Chairman then, this is not a single entity that's going to achieve this. We need an entire ecosystem, the entire industrial community to get on board and work towards this sort of shared future. Any opportunity we have to localise procurement, to localise the supply chain, and to use local assets to develop highly automated manufacturing facilities will support Australia's ability to grow to the level that we need to be, and we should be, quite frankly, in the renewable energy industry. It's probably almost a little bit redundant. I use this slide. It's taken from the Boyer lecture that our Chairman gave, and it's available through ABC. But I use this slide to indicate that I wouldn't want anyone to listen or to see and think, look, this is just the next big thing that's occurring for an individual who owns a significant personal wealth in terms of his shares in Fortescue Metals Group. Make no mistake. This is an absolute passion. This is an individual who does not need to work every day, but I can guarantee you every part of his effort, the proof is in the pudding. He quite literally got off a plane a couple of hours ago. We had no expectation to see him for some time, but he came straight to the office to make sure we were able to move at the pace and to deliver the massive amount of resources and equipment that we need to turn the world green. And, nothing is a better example than, listening to him yourself. I think the other thing that's really important about Fortescue Future Industries is understanding that when you deal with FFI, you're not dealing with just one company. You're dealing with a group of companies. We are very, very closely linked within those companies. And equally, the values that are the shared group of values are the values we use every day in this company. I've been in many companies, and every company has some values written on the wall, and you walk in, they're sort of, something that is part of, I guess, the corporate branding, but not really in part of the day-to-day. I can tell you that as an organisation, that the values absolutely underpin the way we operate, and they're a part of the decisions we consistently make. And I'll give you the example of the values we share with the Minderoo Foundation. Minderoo's largest program is known as Walk Free. Walk Free is dedicated to the end of modern slavery, and modern slavery is defined as there's 10 aspects that go with modern slavery, like bonded labour, child labour, forced marriage, child marriage. These are absolutely core to the way we look at the world. What Fortescue Future Industries or any part of our group of companies will not do is in any way be involved in supply chains where there is the potential for any taint of bonded labour in that supply chain. And that is incredibly to us. Now, all across the world, particularly in some of the lower cost labour markets, there is the danger that you can be involved in a supply chain which has some level of bonded labour. It is our responsibility to prove and to audit our supply chains all the way vertically integrated up to the source of the raw materials to make sure that none of the equipment or material we use is subject to any bonded labour in that supply chain. That is not a negotiable part. There's not a risk threshold that we take on that. It is a absolutely no tolerance part of our company, and that is underpinned by the relationship with the Minderoo Foundation. Equally, you might be aware that the first program under the Minderoo Foundation was Generation 1, which is a program dedicated to not just helping the traditional custodians, but really ensuring there is a viable commercial opportunity and to give them the chance to work within their own companies to establish capability and to future-proof their following generations. That program was started or had a program called A Billion Opportunities. And the Billion Opportunities was about able to issue contracts from the Fortescue Metals Group to traditional custodian-owned and operated companies. It's very pleasing to say that we achieved some months ago now the $3.5 billion issue to 100% owned and operated traditional custodian companies. And I think what's important is the opportunity in this move to renewables is for exactly these sort of companies where you can't build renewable energy in cities. The fact is it's the regions that have the available resource, which is either the solar resource or the wind resource, that's where the renewable energy sources are going to be. And they will require a huge amount of operations and maintenance to maintain these massive sources of energy. The next point, look, while I won't harbour on this, I do think it's important to understand that you are talking about an industrial juggernaut. The figure that really means a lot to us, we spent some time in Europe with some of the largest banks in the world. Hydrogen itself is a relatively small industry. The truth is there is a lot of companies that have not got a huge track record that are involved in the hydrogen industry. The difference with Fortescue is that we have borrowed and repaid over $35 billion. So what that means to the large capital markets and the funds is that they can trust that they can give us these billions of dollars worth of projects, and we have the ability to execute them, as we did with the Fortescue Metals Group, where within a space of 4 years, they built a mine, they built a processing facility, they built a train loading facility, a train line, bought the trains, bought the cars, built a port, and were able to put ore on a ship. That is a massive, complex project, and we're applying exactly the same logic to each of the renewable hydrogen projects that we're developing at the moment. The other thing I think is important is to make sure that there's a really good understanding here that we are three companies. We are an iron ore future-facing minerals company. You can see the portfolio we have, which I'll explain is very large, of renewables, which will be the hydrogen. And then that is underpinned by where FFI manufacturing sits, and that is a technology and a manufacturing company that can underpin all of the equipment needed for these renewables. There's some of the targets you've just heard from our chairman. 2030 is not that far away, as you'll all be aware. 8 years is a very short amount of time, and we need to establish the infrastructure, the equipment very quickly and get the projects up and out of the ground. And that is really 100% of the focus of our business right now. And just to give it some level of context, Fortescue Metals Group is a West Australian iron ore company who sells a significant amount of our iron ore into the low-cost labour markets for processing in Asia. Fortescue Future Industries is very much a global renewable energy company that will sell into global markets. And we've already talked now about the opportunity with the E.ON contract into Germany for 5 million tonnes. We have significant opportunity and agreements as well. So that the flywheels you're operating, you have Australia, New Zealand, who can then sell into the East Asian markets of Japan and South Korea. We have the African generation, which can sell into Germany. And both North America and South America represent internal sales. So we can generate and then supply internally to those locations. And of everything else you'll see in this presentation, that number there, 436, that is a snapshot as of today. That is 436 gigawatts of total renewable energy capacity, which is under various forms of agreement. Now, those agreements range from an exclusive right to study right through to government-approved development applications where we're under construction on some of our major renewable energy projects. Which gets you to what we do here. FFI Manufacturing, we are responsible to make sure that that massive scale of projects we have internally have all of the equipment at a cost, in a quantum, and at the quality level we need to develop these huge mega projects. Now, more importantly and beyond that, it's not just about supplying only internally. That has been tasked by our chairman to make sure that anyone who wants to turn green and wants to be able to participate in the hydrogen value chain has that opportunity, because we have the equipment available at economic and in the quantum and quality that is needed by the rest of the world. That brings us to Gladstone, the Green Energy Manufacturing Centre. The first phase of this is the electrolysers. Now, we did work with all of the governments in Australia, and honestly, Queensland government have been outstanding. I was with the Director Generals last week on Friday. They have been a fantastic partner for us. They are very forward-leaning, they're very flexible, and they've also demonstrated a willingness to sit across the table with us and work out how we solve problems. We can't speak highly enough of that relationship. We have a total of 99 hectares at the Aldoga site, and that area is likely to be expanded, particularly when you listen to the additional requirements being put on us to increase production, particularly on electrolysis. What we've already discussed and where we have technology partnerships is across electrolysers, cables, blades, turbines, solar modules, all of the electrification systems. We are talking about all of the requirements we would have, things like transformers, inverters, switchgear. It's one thing to talk about how many gigawatts worth of hydrogen you can produce, but the reality is you have to capture that energy, store it and transmit it, and put it in a form that can then be used in the electrolyzers. So there's a significant amount of work to be done. The commissioning of that facility will be in the first quarter of calendar year next year. I'll go relatively quickly through the next couple of slides, because what I want to really do is get a chance for some questions, but also talk about what we're looking for. The short version here is, as the chairman has said, these are 1 megawatt stacks. We'll produce 2,000 per year and at a takt time of about 96 minutes, with a significant testing requirement as well on that particular site. What that means is we'll also produce about 300 tonnes of green hydrogen out of that system as well, which would fill, as you can see there, if you take the Toyota Mirai, that would fill almost 60,000 Mirais per year. That's just for us testing our stacks before they go out the door. That is the stack for those who are not particularly familiar with the hydrogen ecosystem or the production of hydrogen. Plug Power is our partner. It is a proton exchange membrane type electrolyzer of technology. That's the stack on the right-hand side there. That is a 1 megawatt stack. That stack, you can see on there, you'll see the material transporters, so anything from the pallet jacks through to the forklifts. So they are the main supplier, or the supplier, of the material handling systems into Amazon, into Walmart, and into DHL in the USA. The first project they'll supply to is the Gibson Island project, which has been announced in Brisbane. And this is the ecosystem. What we need is wind turbines. We need significant amounts of solar. On the bottom right there is the reverse osmosis, the water treatment. We'll be using tens of millions, in fact, hundreds of millions of litres of water per year. And we need to make sure we have the ability to clean that water to a point it can be put into electrolyser. And then obviously all of the systems that go with making sure we can manage these massive amounts of power. That's the global portfolio. The demand we have, just a couple of numbers there to give you some sort of understanding. We peak at over 3,700 6-megawatt wind turbines before the end of this decade. One wind turbine of that size is about 180 tonnes. For 2,000 towers, wind turbine towers, you need 1 million tonnes of plate steel to turn it into the towers that we would need to use. There's well over 100,000 kilometres of cable will be required each year, and we're going to be needing to produce over 20 blades per day, and those blades start anywhere from 82 metres up to just under 100 metres, depending on the height and the wind requirement. What this really says to everyone on this call is the equipment we need to produce at the scale and in the time is not there today. We are not intending to do everything ourselves, but we certainly intend to aggregate all of that equipment and make sure it's available at a quality that we can give to our projects. The last couple of points I'll make is that a project is not viable. It doesn't matter if you've got 500 projects. If you can't make the project economic, then it's not a viable project. We have to make sure that we work with our procurement team and the projects to make sure we can have absolutely lowered installed megawatt costs so that we can make sure these projects get economic. And the way to do that will be to make sure we have highly automated, high volume production facilities, and we have a very slick and efficient supply chain to supply the inbound materials to those facilities. They're really some of the keys of what we're looking for. We need to use innovation. Having a 1% or a 2% reduction in overall installed cost is not going to win the game for the scale we need. We need to find ways to do things new, and that is all about us making sure we can innovate and we can look at the problem differently because we have such a large demand to guarantee the offtake. And this is really the opportunity here. You see I've put in bold the supply chain ecosystem. It's all about making sure that we understand what is the bill of materials, what can we source locally, and where is the opportunity for us to underpin long-term offtake contracts of core materials into our facilities so that that ecosystem can grow and can develop so that we can make sure we are absolutely competitive on a basis against any of the other low-cost labour markets in the world. Now, I do apologise. I've gone fairly quickly through what I was planning to say. I think it's probably worth the opportunity to have our chairman speak to you. So there is a couple of minutes now, I believe, for some questions, Nicola, and then I'm going to move into the booth, I believe, on completion.
It was such an honour to have Mr. Andrew Forrest join us, and most of the chat is all about that little speech at the beginning, and I think we're all got a fire in our bellies now to help make the world go green 100%, and very much enjoyed your presentation. I do have a few questions though. One in particular about the end of life cycle for some of the assets in green energy, like the blades on a wind turbine and things like that. How is FFI managing that end of life cycle for equipment?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Nicola. So there's no point at all in us being a green company if the reality is we're going to create, at the end of life of these systems we produce, a huge liability for the planet. So everything we are doing now, there is a degree of acceptance, there's some level of chicken and egg. Some of the technology to make these systems completely recyclable doesn't exist today. But the requirement I have from my board, they will not approve any of our major projects or manufacturing facilities unless we can guarantee we have a pathway to completely carbon neutral and recyclable materials and systems. So, if you take, for example, steel today, is what, 8% of global emissions of CO2. But we need to make sure we have a pathway to use CO2 free or net zero steel production in the future. And that is every one of our programs at the moment, of all of the major systems we're looking at producing, have to have that pathway to being net zero over time. And it's not just the CO2 emission, but also recyclability. We will not put plastics into the environment. We will not put dangerous materials into the environment.
And that's wonderful to hear. Have the EPCs been finalised for delivering the project as yet, or are some of those opportunities still available?
Sorry, Nicola, did you say the EPCs?
Yeah, have they been finalised for delivering the project?
We actually are quite literally within a couple of days of finalising the EPC for the initial installation of the line. We already have announced Hutchinson is our contractor that is up on site at the moment. We EPC most of our own projects to make sure, particularly at the start, we can keep a really close eye on it. But as you've sort of heard from the demand there, we can't do all of this ourselves. We're not in any way arrogant enough to think that we should do all of it ourselves. So we absolutely want to make sure that we have the opportunity to work with the best of breed. Australia has a fantastic reputation for quality. We have a fantastic ability to do things large and do things well. And we will need every bit of that capability to make sure we deliver on these plans.
So in that vein, how does the delegation or businesses that think they can complement your vision and what you're trying to achieve, how do you partner with FFI and submit a capability statement and connect with you?
Yeah, that's an excellent question as well. So we have a number of systems that we use to make sure we have that opportunity. We have a very mature contracts, procurement, supply chain department within the company. They have a very long history with all of the partners we've used historically. But remember, we are largely a West Australian company to date. So as an example, when we did go to the East Coast, it was actually tough for us, if I'm quite honest, to get partners to come and look to bid on our work. And it was actually through that contracts and procurement supply chain group who went calling some companies and said, please, would you be willing to look at our opportunities? I'm relatively confident that that is sort of changing, and events like this go a long way to making sure that people understand the scale of what we're trying to achieve. And this is not just about building wind towers. We need sheds to put our huge factories in. We're going to need logistics support. So we have a number of opportunities and ways to connect with the company. We do have the generic emails are actually quite well utilised here, so they do come through to the right departments. We maintain databases of all those parties, and there's a number of ways through the website that you can contact us.
Well, if you weren't on the radar before, Cameron, I can guarantee you're on the radar now. Thanks so much for your presentation, and please thank your chairman. I will invite you